The studio is electric, every light trained on the center of the stage. Chris Wallace sits forward, his eyes sharp, his voice carrying the weight of decades spent holding the powerful to account. Across from him, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett sits poised, her hands folded, her gaze unwavering. The world is watching, and everyone knows it. Wallace doesn't waste a second. "Congresswoman Crockett," he begins, his tone deceptively polite. "You've been called a disruptor, a firebrand, even a troublemaker by your critics. Some say you care more about making headlines than making progress. Tonight I want to know, are you here to serve your constituents or just to serve yourself?" The words hang in the air, heavy and loaded. The audience shifts in their seats. On social media, the hashtags are already flying. Hashtag Crockett on the hot seat. Hashtag Wallace vs. Crockett. The tension is so thick it's almost visible, a shimmering line between accusation and defense. Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. For a split second, the entire studio seems to hold its breath, waiting for her to react. Waiting for the fireworks, the stumble, the soundbite that will be replayed for days. But Crockett's silence is its own answer, a calm before the storm. Wallace presses on, his voice rising, just enough to signal he's not backing down. "You've made a lot of noise in Congress, Congresswoman. But what have you actually accomplished for the people who sent you there? Are you just another headline chaser, or do you have something real to offer?" The camera cuts to Crockett, her face illuminated, her expression unreadable. The audience can feel the stakes. This isn't just another interview. This is a test, a trial by fire, live and unfiltered. And in that moment, as the world leans in, Jasmine Crockett finally opens her mouth to speak. The studio falls silent, the tension at its breaking point, but no one, least of all Chris Wallace, was prepared for what Jasmine Crockett would say next. Before Jasmine Crockett utters a single word, the story of this moment stretches far beyond the studio walls. It's a collision years in the making, a flashpoint in a country desperate for something real. To understand why the air is so charged, you have to rewind. Back to the rise of a congresswoman who refused to play by the old rules, and a journalist who built his legacy by breaking the powerful. Jasmine Crockett's journey is anything but ordinary. Born to working-class parents, she grew up watching her mother juggle 2 jobs and her father fight for every paycheck. She learned early that dignity isn't given, it's earned, and sometimes it's taken. When the halls of her Texas high school, she was the kid who spoke up when others stayed silent. In college, she marched for justice, her voice echoing through streets that too often tried to drown her out. By the time she reached Congress, she was already a symbol, a lightning rod for those who saw themselves in her, and a target for those who feared what she represented. But Crockett's rise wasn't just about breaking barriers. It was about refusing to be boxed in. She challenged the status quo, called out hypocrisy, and made enemies as quickly as she made allies. Her speeches went viral, her passion ignited movements, and her very presence in Congress became a statement. America is changing, and so is its leadership. On the other side of the table sits Chris Wallace, a legend in his own right. For decades, he's been the journalist politicians fear most, a man who can turn a simple question into a career-defining moment. He's grilled presidents, exposed scandals, and never shied away from controversy. His interviews are battlegrounds. And tonight, he's brought his sharpest weapons. The stakes couldn't be higher. Millions are watching, not just for entertainment, but for validation. For the immigrant family in Houston who sees their own struggles in Crockett's story. For the young activist in Detroit who's tired of empty promises. For every American who's ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. They're not just hoping for a good answer. They're hoping for a sign that someone like them can stand tall, even when the spotlight is harshest. Social media is ablaze. Commentators are already speculating, will Crockett fold under pressure? Will Wallace finally meet his match? The hashtags trend, the memes fly, and the anticipation builds with every passing second. This isn't just an interview. It's a referendum on who gets to speak, who gets to lead, and who gets to define the American story. The nation is hungry for authenticity, for truth, for a moment that cuts through the noise and says something real. Millions tuned in, expecting fireworks. But what happened next would redefine the rules of political debate. Chris Wallace's name is synonymous with the art of the televised showdown. For decades, he's been the face of hard-hitting journalism, the man who never flinched, never softened, never let a politician off the hook. His interviews are legend, part theater, part interrogation, always unforgettable. No. In the world of political media, Wallace is both feared and respected. A gatekeeper who can make or break reputations with a single well-timed question. His career began in the shadow of his father, the iconic Mike Wallace of 60 Minutes fame. But Chris quickly carved out his own path, determined to be more than just a legacy. He cut his teeth covering City Hall scandals and war zones, learning early that the truth rarely comes easy. By the time he landed his own Sunday show, he'd developed a reputation for being relentless, never satisfied with rehearsed talking points, always digging for the story beneath the story. Wallace's interviews are a masterclass in controlled aggression. He listens, nods, and then pounces, his questions sharp as scalpels. He's left presidents stammering, senators sweating, and CEOs scrambling for words. Clips of his most brutal takedowns rack up millions of views online. There's the time he cornered a sitting president on live TV, refusing to let him dodge. A question about foreign interference, or the moment he forced a powerful senator to admit on camera that she hadn't read the very bill she was championing. For viewers, these moments are cathartic, a rare glimpse of accountability in a world of spin, but Wallace's style is not without controversy. For every fan who praises his fearlessness, there's a critic who accuses him of crossing the line. Some say his questions are less about truth and more about spectacle, designed to provoke rather than inform. They point to interviews where his tone turned icy, where his persistence felt less like journalism and more like a personal vendetta. In the age of viral clips and social media outrage, the line between tough questioning and outright attack has never been thinner. Behind the scenes, producers whisper about the Wallace method, a strategy built on pressure, precision, and the occasional ambush. He's known for his exhaustive prep, his ability to recall obscure facts, and his willingness to press a guest until they crack. Some politicians refuse to appear on his show, fearing the humiliation that might follow. Others see it as a rite of passage, a test of their mettle. Survive a Wallace interview, and you've earned your stripes. Yet, for all his skill, there's an undercurrent of arrogance that even his admirers can't ignore. Wallace relishes the role of kingmaker, the man who can expose hypocrisy with a single question. He's built a brand on being unflappable, untouchable, the last honest broker in a world of partisanship. But that confidence can sometimes curdle into something sharper, since that he and he alone knows what the public needs to hear. Tonight, as the cameras roll and the nation watches, Wallace is in his element. He's done his homework, studied every speech, every vote, every viral moment in Jasmine Crockett's career. He's ready to challenge, to confront, to push her to the edge. The audience expects nothing less. They want to see if Crockett can withstand the Wallace gauntlet, if she can keep her composure when the questions turn personal. But there's a tension in the air, a sense that, this time, the stakes are different. Crockett isn't just another politician with a polished script. She's a symbol, a disruptor, a voice for those who've never been invited to the table. And Wallace, for all his experience, is facing a new kind of opponent, one who's not afraid to call out the game as it's being played. Tonight, Wallace wasn't just asking questions. He was on the hunt. But was he ready for the answer? Jasmine Crockett's story doesn't begin in the marble corridors of Congress or the glare of national television. It begins in a modest home on the south side of Dallas, where the hum of traffic mixed with the laughter of children playing in the street. Her mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, and her father, a mechanic with calloused hands, taught her that dignity is not something you inherit. It's something you fight for every single day as a child. Jasmine watched her parents stretch, every dollar sacrificing their own comfort so she could have a shot at something better. She learned early that the world didn't always play fair. She saw her father passed over for promotions, her mother's exhaustion dismissed by supervisors who never bothered to learn her name. But in that small house, Jasmine was told she could be anything. Her parents' faith in her was unshakable, and it became the foundation for everything she would become. School was Jasmine's first battleground. She was the only black girl in her advanced classes, the one teachers sometimes overlooked, the one classmates underestimated. But Jasmine refused to shrink. When a teacher once told her that girls, like you don't usually make it to the top, Jasmine didn't cry. She raised her hand higher, studied harder, and made sure her name was at the top of every honor roll. She learned to turn every slight into fuel, every insult into motivation. By the time she reached college, Jasmine was a force. She marched for justice, organized voter drives, and spoke out against policies that left her community behind. She didn't just want to succeed, she wanted to bring others with her. Law school was another crucible. She worked nights to pay tuition, spent weekends volunteering at legal clinics, and never forgot the faces of the families who came to her for help. She saw the way the system chewed people up, the way justice was too often a privilege, not a right. Jasmine's decision to run for office wasn't born of ambition, it was born of frustration. She was tired of watching politicians make promises they never intended to keep. She was tired of seeing her community's needs ignored, their voices drowned out by lobbyists and insiders. So she ran, not as a polished insider, but as a fighter. Her campaign was scrappy, underfunded, and powered by volunteers who believed in her vision. She knocked on doors, listened to stories, and promised to be the voice that wouldn't be silenced. The road to Congress was anything but smooth. Jasmine faced attacks from all sides, whispers about her background, doubts about her experience, outright racism from those who couldn't imagine someone like her in power, endured threats, sleepless nights, and moments of crushing doubt. But every time she thought about giving up, she remembered her mother's tired smile, her father's quiet pride, and the kids in her old neighborhood who needed to see that someone like them could make it. When Jasmine finally won her seat, it wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for everyone who'd ever been told to wait their turn, to lower their voice, to settle for less. She walked into Congress with her head held high, determined to be more than just a symbol. She fought for criminal justice reform, for affordable health care, for the right of every child to dream as big as she once had. She spoke with passion, voted with conviction, and never forgot where she came from. But with every step forward came new challenges. The old guard in Congress didn't know what to make of her. Some tried to box her in, to dismiss her as a troublemaker or a headline chaser. Others tried to co-opt her, to use her story for their own gain. Jasmine refused to play along. She called out hypocrisy, stood up to bullies, and made it clear that she wasn't in Washington to make friends. She was there to make change. Her journey was marked by sacrifice. She missed birthdays, funerals, and quiet moments with family. She endured the loneliness that comes with being the first, the only, the one who stands out. But Jasmine never wavered. She carried the hopes of her community on her shoulders, knowing that every battle she fought was bigger than herself. Now, under the blinding lights of the studio, Jasmine Crockett sits across from Chris Wallace, the weight of her journey pressing in on all sides. She is calm, composed, and unbreakable. Every challenge, every insult, every late night had led her to this very chair. Under these blinding lights, and as the world waits for her answer, Jasmine knows she is ready. She has faced tougher questions, harsher critics, and higher stakes. Tonight, she is not just representing herself, she is carrying the dreams of everyone who has ever been told they don't belong. And she is about to show the world exactly what dignity under fire looks like. But as the seconds tick by and the tension in the studio grows, one question remains. Will her journey be enough to withstand the Wallace method? Or will this be the moment that changes everything? The camera returns to the studio, where the air is thick with anticipation. Chris Wallace leans in, his eyes narrowing, his voice taking on a sharper edge. The pleasantries are over. Now it's a contest of wills. Congresswoman Crockett, Wallace says, "You talk about fighting for justice, but your critics say you're more interested in stirring up division than building consensus. Isn't it true that your rhetoric sometimes does more harm than good?" Jasmine Crockett meets his gaze, her expression steady. She begins to answer, but Wallace cuts in, his tone insistent. Let's be honest, Congresswoman. You've called out members of your own party. You've challenged leadership. Some say you're impossible to work with. How do you respond to those who claim you're just another voice of outrage in a system already drowning in noise? The audience shifts. Sensing the stakes rising, Crockett's supporters hold their breath while skeptics wait for her to falter. Social media lights up, the debate spilling out into living rooms and group chats across the country. Crockett starts to reply, but Wallace interrupts again, pressing harder. You say you represent the people, but your voting record shows you've broken with your party on key issues. Are you really standing up for your constituents? Or are you just trying to make a name for yourself? The questions come rapid fire, each one more pointed than the last. Wallace's voice is relentless, his words designed to corner, to provoke, to force a misstep. He brings up past controversies, quotes her critics, and challenges her on policy. Details. The pressure is mounting, the spotlight growing hotter. Crockett's composure is tested. She takes a breath, refusing to be rattled. But Wallace isn't finished. Let's talk about your recent comments on police reform. Some have accused you of being anti-law enforcement. How do you respond to those who say your positions are too extreme for mainstream America? The studio is silent, the tension almost unbearable. Crockett's face is calm, but her eyes flash with determination. She begins to answer, but Wallace pushes again, his voice rising. Congresswoman, with all due respect, isn't it true that your approach alienates more people than it inspires? Are you really helping your community, or just fueling the fire? The words hang in the air, heavy and accusatory. The audience is on edge, waiting for Crockett to stumble, to lash out, to lose her cool. The pressure is immense, the scrutiny unrelenting, but Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. She sits up straighter, her voice steady, her resolve unshaken. The world is watching, waiting to see if she will break under the weight of Wallace's interrogation. And then, as the pressure reached its peak, Jasmine Crockett did the unthinkable. Jasmine Crockett sits perfectly still, her hands folded, her eyes locked on Chris Wallace. The barrage of questions has ended, but the echoes still hang in the air. The audience waits, breathless, for her to snap, to stumble, to fight fire with fire. But Crockett does none of those things. Instead, she lets the silence stretch, commanding the room with nothing but her presence. When she finally speaks, her voice is calm, almost gentle. Chris, I appreciate your questions. I really do. Because I think they reveal something important, not just about me, but about the way we talk about leadership in this country. Wallace blinks, caught off guard by her composure. Crockett continues, her words measured, her tone unwavering. You've asked if I'm here to make headlines or to make progress. Let's be honest. Sometimes making progress means making people uncomfortable. Sometimes it means refusing to accept the status quo, even when it's easier to stay quiet. She pauses, letting her words sink in. The studio is silent, the tension transformed into something electric. You say I've challenged my own party, you're right. Because my loyalty isn't to a party, it's to the people who sent me here. The single mother working 2 jobs, the kid who's told they don't belong,
Us.
the families who've been waiting for justice for far too long. That makes me a disruptor, then I'll wear that label with pride. Wallace tries to interject, but Crockett holds up a hand, her voice never rising, never wavering. You ask if I'm impossible to work with? I'd ask you, impossible for whom? For those who want to keep things exactly as they are? For those who benefit from a system that leaves so many behind? I didn't come to Congress to make friends. I came to make change. And change is never comfortable for those who profit from the way things are. The camera zooms in on Wallace, his expression shifting from confidence to uncertainty. Crockett turns, speaking not just to him, but to the millions watching at home. You brought up my voting record. I've broken with my party when I believed it was the right thing to do, because I answer to my constituents, not to party bosses or corporate donors. I was elected to serve the people, not the powerful. She leans forward, her eyes shining with conviction. You mentioned my comments on police reform. Let me be clear. I support law enforcement. I also support accountability. 'Cause loving your country means wanting it to be better. It means demanding justice, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The studio is so quiet you can hear the hum of the lights. Crockett's words cut through the tension like a blade. You ask if my approach alienates people? I say it invites them in. It says to every person who's ever felt unseen or unheard, you matter. Your story matters. And I will not apologize for fighting for you. Wallace, for the first time, seems at a loss. He glances at his notes, searching for a foothold, but Crockett isn't finished. Chris, I know what it's like to be underestimated, to be told to wait your turn, to lower your voice, to be grateful for scraps. But I didn't. Come this far to play small. I came to open doors, to break ceilings, to make sure the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles I did. She turns back to the camera, her voice rising just enough to fill the room. To everyone watching tonight, especially the young people, the immigrants, the dreamers, the fighters, don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong. Don't let anyone define your worth by their comfort. Stand tall, speak up, and know that you are not alone. The words hang in the air, powerful and undeniable. The audience is transfixed. On social media, the reaction is immediate and explosive. Tweets flood in. Jasmine Crockett just schooled Chris Wallace. This is what leadership looks like. I've never felt so seen on national TV. Hashtags trend within minutes. Hashtag Crockett.com. Hashtag mic drop moment. Hashtag dignity under fire. Even Wallace, the master of the poker face, can't hide his surprise. He tries to regain control, but his next question falters, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. Congresswoman, I suppose some would say that's a very passionate response. But do you really believe that confrontation is the best way to get things done? Crockett smiles, her confidence unshaken. Chris, I believe in conversation. I believe in listening, but I also believe in truth. Sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Sometimes it means standing alone. But I'd rather stand alone for what's right than stand with the crowd for what's easy. The studio audience, silent until now, erupts in applause. Even some of Wallace's producers exchange glances, recognizing the gravity of what just happened. Crockett's words have shifted the energy in the room, turning a hostile interrogation into a moment of clarity and hope. Viewers at home are glued to their screens. Clips of Crockett's answer are already being shared, dissected, and celebrated. Memes pop up, capturing the look on Wallace's face. Commentators rush to weigh in, some praising Crockett's poise, others scrambling to spin the moment. But the real shock is Wallace's reaction, a rare, visible crack in his legendary composure. He leans back, momentarily speechless, his usual arsenal of follow-ups rendered useless. For a brief, unforgettable moment, the power dynamic has shifted. Crockett is no longer on the defensive. She owns the room, the narrative, the moment. And as the applause fades and the cameras keep rolling, one thing is clear. This was more than just a viral soundbite. It was a turning point, a reminder that dignity, courage, and truth can still cut through the noise. But as the world celebrates, a new question emerges. What will the aftermath of this moment look like? And how far will the shockwaves travel? Moment Jasmine Crockett's words left her lips, the world seemed to pause. Then, as if on cue, the internet erupted. Within minutes, clips of her calm, unflinching response to Chris Wallace were everywhere. On Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. The hashtags #CrockettCalm and #DignityUnderFire trended at lightning speed. As millions replayed the exchange, dissected every word, and shared their own stories of being underestimated, overlooked, or told to wait their turn, pundits scrambled to keep up. On cable news, anchors replayed the clip, their voices tinged with awe or disbelief, depending on which side of the aisle they sat. A masterclass in composure, one commentator declared. A new standard for political courage, said another. Even those who had doubted Crockett's ability to handle the Wallace gauntlet found themselves rethinking old assumptions. The debate wasn't just about policy anymore. It was about who gets to speak, who gets to lead, and who gets to define the American story. Celebrities joined the chorus. List actors tweeted their support. Musicians posted clips to their stories. and athletes wore shirts emblazoned with Crockett's words, "I answer to the people, not the powerful." For a generation hungry for authenticity, Crockett's moment was more than just a viral soundbite. It was a rallying cry. But the impact didn't stop at the top. In living rooms and classrooms, in barbershops and break rooms, people talked about what they'd seen. Immigrant families saw themselves in Crockett's journey, her refusal to shrink in the face of pressure. Young women of color, in particular, felt a surge of pride. Teachers played the clip for their students, sparking conversations about courage, representation, and the power of speaking truth to power. Not everyone was celebrating, of course. Critics on talk radio and partisan blogs tried to spin the moment, accusing Crockett of grandstanding or disrespecting a respected journalist. Some politicians, feeling the heat, issued carefully worded statements, trying to walk the line between acknowledging Crockett's poise and defending the old guard. But the more they tried to control the narrative, the more it slipped from there. Supporters rallied. Grassroots organizations launched fundraising drives using Crockett's words as their rallying cry. Activists organized watch parties, turning a single interview into a movement. For many, it wasn't just about Crockett. It was about the possibility of a new kind of leadership, one that didn't apologize for its roots or its passion. The ripple effect was immediate and profound. In the days that followed, other politicians were asked to respond to Crockett's moment. Some tried to emulate her calm, others bristled at the comparison. Editorials appeared in major newspapers, debating whether this was a turning point for political discourse or just another viral flash in the pan. But for those who had watched the interview live, there was no question. Something had shifted. Social media became a battleground of ideas. Memes captured the look on Wallace's face, while threads of personal stories flooded timelines. People shared their own experiences of being challenged, of standing up for what they believed in, of refusing to be silenced. The conversation grew beyond Crockett and Wallace, touching on race, gender, power, and the future of American politics. In the midst of the noise, Crockett herself remained steady. She thanked her supporters, acknowledged her critics, and reminded everyone that the work was far from over. "This moment isn't about me," she tweeted. "It's about all of us who believe in dignity, justice, and the power of our voices. Let's keep pushing." But the true impact of Crockett's words was only just beginning to be felt. As the dust settled and the headlines faded, Jasmine Crockett's answer began to take on a life of its own. It was replayed not just as a political moment, but as a lesson, a blueprint for how to stand tall when the world tries to shrink you. In classrooms, community centers, and family kitchens, people talked less about the confrontation and more about the calm, the clarity, and the courage it took to answer provocation with dignity. Crockett's words became a touchstone for anyone who had ever felt the sting of being underestimated. She showed that you don't have to match aggression with aggression, that you can hold your ground without losing your soul. In a world obsessed with spectacle, she chose substance. In a culture that rewards the loudest voice, she proved the power of a steady one. The lesson was clear. True strength isn't about dominating the conversation, it's about elevating it. Crockett's response wasn't just a rebuttal to Chris Wallace. It was a message to every person watching that their story, their truth, and their dignity matter. She reminded the nation that leadership isn't about never being challenged. It's about how you respond when you are. For young people, especially those from immigrant families or marginalized backgrounds, Crockett's moment was a beacon. She didn't apologize for her roots or her passion. She didn't shrink to fit someone else's expectations. Instead, she stood in the spotlight and claimed her space. It's not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told to wait their turn. The power of her answer rippled outward, inspiring others to speak up, to push back, to believe that their voices could change the conversation. Crockett's calm under fire became a rallying cry for a new generation of leaders, one that values truth over theatrics, courage over comfort, and justice over convenience. In the end, it wasn't just a viral moment. It was a masterclass in grace under fire. Crockett's example reminded everyone watching that the real test of character comes not when things are easy, but when the pressure is at its highest. She showed that you can face down the toughest questions, the harshest critics, and the brightest lights, and still walk away with your dignity intact. As the video draws to a close, the message lingers. The world will always have its Chris Wallaces, those who challenge, who question, who push. But it's how we answer, how we hold ourselves, and how we lift others up in the process that truly defines us. And for everyone who watched Jasmine Crockett that night, the lesson was unforgettable. Stand tall, speak your truth, and never let anyone else decide your worth. So when Chris Wallace pushed Jasmine Crockett on live TV, no one expected her calm answer to leave the studio frozen silent, or to spark a movement that would ripple far beyond those four walls. In a world hungry for authenticity, Crockett's response was more than just a viral moment. It was a reminder that dignity, truth, and courage still matter. Even when the spotlight is harshest, her words cut through the noise, not with anger, but with clarity. She showed us all that you don't have to shout to be heard, and you don't have to compromise your values to make an impact. In that moment, Crockett didn't just defend herself. She stood up for everyone who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to wait their turn. If this story moved you, if you believe in the power of calm, courage, and unapologetic truth, now is the time to act. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that celebrate real leadership and real change. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their voice matters. And join the conversation, because every time we lift each other up, we make our democracy stronger. This isn't just about one interview or one politician. It's about all of us and the future we're building together. Because every time someone stands up with calm and courage, history is made, and you can be part of it.